Okay then gang, so what I'd like to do now is implement a bit of validation into this form so that, for example, we can't add empty fields and it accepts that. So Svelte doesn't come with any out-of-the-box validation for forms and we have to use our own logic, but that doesn't matter because it is pretty simple to do, and that's what we're going to do in this video. So right here, where we fire the submit handler when the form is submitted, we're going to validate the question first of all, then validate answer A, then answer B. Okay? Now, what I'm also going to do is create a new variable called errors. And that is going to be an object which looks very similar to begin with to this fields object. And what we'll be doing is storing an error for the question in this property value, an error for answer A right here, and an error for answer B right here. So we're tracking any errors as we validate each field as we go forth, and if by the end of it we have an error in one of these fields, we'll declare that the form is not valid, and then we'll output that error in the relevant area down here in the form. So I hope that makes sense. I'm also going to create another variable called valid, and I'm going to set that equal to false to begin with. Now this value right here, valid, is going to be a boolean, and when the form is not valid, it's going to be false. When the form is valid, it's going to be true. Now, to begin with, when we first load the form, we're going to assume that the form is false. And then later on, we'll make it true. And it will only become false again if there is an error. Okay? All right then, so how do we validate these different things? Well, the first thing we're going to do actually is, like I just say, set valid equal to true. So when we submit the form, before it does any kind of validation on any of the fields, it's going to say, well, okay, now the form is true to begin with. Now, if any of these fail, if any of these validations fail, at that point we'll make valid false. All right? So then, validate question. How do we validate this? Well, we'll do an if check. So I'm going to say if fields, which is this object right here, because we're going to get the value of the question from the fields object. So if fields.question dot trim to take away any white space of the answer, dot length, so how many characters, is less than 5, then it's not going to be valid. So I want the question to be at least 5 characters long. So if this is true right here and it's less than 5, it means that it's not valid because we don't want a question less than 5 characters long. So at that point, we're going to take valid and set it equal to false. We're also going to add an error to this property question in the errors object. So we'll say errors and say dot question is going to be equal to some kind of value, and that value is going to say question must be at least 5 characters long. Okay, so just some basic validation right there. Okay, so that's the first one done. Now in the else case down here, if this did pass, then what I want to do is reset this so it's a blank string again. So I'm going to say errors dot question is going to be equal to an empty string. And the reason I'm doing that is because imagine we submit the form, right? And at first, this is false, so it's not valid. And we set the question to be this thing right here. Now, imagine we rectify that and we submit it again, and now this is fine, but another field is not valid. Well, because this one's fine, I want to reset the error on the question to be an empty string so we don't repeat that validation feedback to the user. We just output the validation that the user needs. So that's that little bit. I'm going to now copy all of this and paste it down here so we can do answer A. And for this, the validation is going to be that the length has to be more than 1 character. Now, or at least 1 character rather. Now, it can be 1 character because the question could just be, what's your favourite letter, A or B? I know that's a stupid poll, but you could have 1 character answers, I suppose. So, again, if this is false right here, we need to say that, okay, the form is no longer valid, so we set valid equal to false. Then we want to update this thing right here to answer A. And by the way, this needs to be answer A as well. And we need to say, get rid of all that in fact, answer A cannot be empty, okay? And this needs to change to answer A as well. All right, so that's answer A, validation done. Answer B is going to be very similar. So we just need to change this and this to answer B, and then answer B over here as well. And now we're sorted. So when we submit the form now, we start off with valid being true. If any of these fail right here, any of them at all, valid becomes false, and we add an error to this object right here for that field. So at the end of it, we're going to have all the errors in here. Now there might only be one. There might only be one error, for example, for answer A, or there could be two. Either way, we're going to have an object with all of those errors. So first of all, what I'm going to do at the bottom is a little comment to say, okay, at this point, we want to add a new poll, right? But we only want to add it if valid is true. So if valid, then at this point, we'll console.log and we'll say valid, so we know it's valid, and we'll output the fields object, so what a user types in. Now, at this point in the future, we're actually going to add that new poll to an array of data, but for now we're just logging it to the console. Now, if it's not valid, it's not going to do this, and instead, we now have this object which is populated with errors, so we could output that down here in the different form fields. So what I'm going to do is a little div beneath each of the inputs, and it's going to have a class of error, and inside this one we'll do errors.question. So that's this object up here, errors, and we're grabbing the question property. Now if it's an empty string because that field was valid, then we won't see anything, but if we have added this error, then we'll see this right here. Okay, so if there's an error with this field, then we'll see that feedback right here. Now I'm going to copy that and paste it right down here, and also below the other one, and I'm going to change this to answer A and this one to answer B, like so. So if I save this now and come over here and try to add a new poll, if I try to add this, then none of the fields are going to be valid, and we get this error feedback right here for each one of the fields, and nothing is logged to the console right here because the form is not valid. Okay, now if I rectify this one, if I add in a poll question, add poll, now this becomes valid, and these two right here are still invalid, but the top error has gone away. So if I do answer B, add a poll, that goes away, and answer A, that goes away, and now we can see the form is valid, and we get this object right here, which is what a user has entered in, the question, the answer A, and answer B. So we can use that to later add it to an array of data. So that's pretty much it. There is one more thing I want to do, and that is just to style this error class a little bit so it looks a bit better. Maybe colorize it so it's red or something like that. So error font weight, first of all, is going to be bold, and the font size is going to be a bit smaller, 12 pixels, and then the color is going to be that red color, which is not in this component. I think it's in one of the others. Let me go to tabs and copy and paste that color because I'm super lazy, and then paste it right here, save it, and let's check this out. So add a new poll, and we can see now those new styles right here. So let's try this, make sure everything works. Okay, this needs to be at least 5 characters long. Yep, everything still works, awesome. So there we go, now we have some custom form validation for our form. In the next video, we're going to look at how we can take this and actually add a new poll to an array of data.